Hello everyone and welcome back to this week's episode of Sports Corner. I'm Cole Young, and this week, most of the news has been revolving around one topic, and that topic is breaking records. If you remember, about a week or so ago, I extensively covered Caitlin Clark, the University of Iowa historic point guard. On February 16th, she became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA Division I women's basketball history after draining a 33-foot three-pointer to break Kelsey Plum's record of 3,527 points. I went into detail about Clark's record and how she got to this point, but if you remember, at the very end of the segment, I mentioned that she wasn't done setting records just yet. After that Iowa victory 2 weeks ago, Clark had the opportunity to break Pistol Pete Maravich's mark of 3,667 points for most career points in Division I history for men and women. And, spoiler alert, she did just that. The Iowa point guard entered her final collegiate regular season game against Ohio State this past Sunday, needing just 18 points to pass Maravich. She scored 11 straight Iowa points in a second quarter stretch and then hit 2 free throws just before halftime to break the record. Not only did she break the record, but Iowa won a crucial matchup as they defeated number 2 Ohio State to secure the number 2 seed in the upcoming Big Ten tournament with a 15-3 conference record. Ohio State still remains the number 1 seed after falling to 16-2. While her all-time scoring record is one of, if not the greatest achievement across all of basketball, this isn't the only record that Clark has set. Clark holds various school, Big Ten, and Division I scoring records for three-point shooting, made field goals, and more. She's closing in on the single-season scoring average record with 33.6 points per game, which was set in 1989 by Mississippi Valley State's Patricia Hoskin, and the career scoring average with 28.4 points per game by Hoskins from 1986 to 1989. Clark is averaging 28.3 points per game over her career. The Iowa native is also the first to score 3,000 points with 1,000 assists. She remains 6th in all-time assists with a chance to move up after adding to her 1,049 total. Clark's 17 career triple-doubles trail only Sabrina Ionescu with 26, and are 5 more than the men's leader Kyle Collinsworth, who had 12 at BYU. Out of their 30 games this season, there was only one game where Clark didn't lead the team in points, but she led the team in assists in every single game this regular season. Clark will go down as one of, if not the greatest college basketball player of all time, and she's not done yet. Iowa will play Penn State in the second round of the Big Ten tournament today at 3:30 p.m., and then Iowa will look to make another run at a national championship in this year's March Madness tournament. Switching over to men's basketball, 2 more records were set in the NBA this past week. The NBA's all-time leading scorer, LeBron James, just hit a major landmark in the NBA that has never been done before when he reached 40,000 career points last weekend. In his 21st season in the NBA, he's still averaging about 25 points per game. Counting both playoff and regular season points, James already eclipsed 40,000 points because he had 48,014 entering Saturday. There isn't much more to say about LeBron James that hasn't already been said. He's a 4-time NBA champion, 4-time MVP, the all-time leading scorer, 20-time All-Star, etc., etc., etc. But this record is more wild than any of his previous accomplishments, and I'll explain how. No other active player has even 30,000 career points. Kevin Durant is closest with 28,342, which makes him the league's number 9 all-time leading scorer. But Durant, if he keeps up his game average, would have to play basically every single game until the end of the 2028 season to reach the 40,000 mark, which means Durant would need to play every single game until he's 40 years old. James has also played the second most regular season and most playoff minutes in league history. He's the only NBA player in history with at least 10,000 points, 10,000 rebounds, and 10,000 assists. This one isn't necessarily related to points, but still made me stop in my tracks for a second. LeBron James has played against 35% of all NBA players in history. It truly seems that it'll be a very long time for someone to surpass all the landmarks set by James, if at all. I hate to end the praise on a negative comment, but it's worth noting that the Lakers did still lose that game to the Nuggets where James set the record. Speaking of losses and the NBA and continuing on the theme of breaking records, the Boston Celtics did something that has never been done in NBA history earlier this week. The Celtics posted their 3rd largest winning margin in franchise history after beating the Golden State Warriors with a whopping 140-88 victory on Sunday. Boston is now the only team in NBA history to win by 50 points or more 3 times in one season. They did this to cap off a franchise-best 11-game win streak, and they led by a franchise record 44 points at halftime and then pushed it to 51 in the third quarter. The Celtics are beating teams by an average of 22 points over their past 11 games, the best point differential over a win streak of at least 10 games in a single season in NBA history. If it wasn't clear by all those jaw-dropping stats, the Celtics are absolutely dominant this season, and it appears it's their championship to lose. Another team from the U.S. has been dominant lately, and that's the U.S. women's national team in this year's CONCACAF Gold Cup. The U.S. started the group stage with a match against the Dominican Republic. 18-year-old Olivia Moultrie scored twice in her first national team start, and the United States defeated the Dominican Republic 5-0 to start the cup off strong. Then last Friday night in a matchup against Argentina, Jaden Shaw scored a pair of goals and the United States went up 3-0 within the first 20 minutes before going on to defeat Argentina 4-0. This means in the first two matches, the US had outscored their opponents 9-0. With 4 teams per group, each team had to play 3 matches. So, sitting at 2-0, the US was set to square off with rival Mexico. Mexico beat the United States for just the second time ever with a 2-0 victory Monday night. The U.S. entered the game with a 41-1 record against Mexico, with its only previous loss coming during the Women's World Cup qualifying in 2010. Even with the heartbreaking loss, the U.S. advanced past the group stage and was set to square off with Colombia in the quarterfinals. First half goals from Lindsey Horan, Jenna Neiswanger, and Jaden Shaw gave the U.S. a comfortable lead at halftime, and the U.S. then shut Colombia down in the second half, coming out victorious with a 3-0 win. This victory set up a semifinal match with Canada on Wednesday night at Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego. If you don't remember what the weather was like on Wednesday, it rained pretty hard all throughout the afternoon and the night, so the US team had to battle through some pretty tough field conditions. After 120 minutes of regulation and extra time ended, the score sat at a 2-2 draw, meaning the match was headed to penalty kicks. Behind goalkeeper Alyssa Naher's 3 big saves in the shootout and her own penalty kick goal, Team USA defeated Canada 3-1 in a penalty kick shootout and earned their spot in the championship match with Brazil. The 2024 CONCACAF Women's Gold Cup final against Brazil in San Diego at Snapdragon Stadium will be this Sunday, March 10th at 5:15 p.m. To end the show, I had to throw in a few major NFL stories. First, I've been saying it for a few weeks now, but it is officially official. The Denver Broncos are moving on from Russell Wilson after just 2 seasons. Wilson played 30 games under center for the Broncos, leading them to just an 11-19 record, completing 63% of his passes for 6,594 yards and throwing 42 touchdowns with 19 interceptions. Denver boasted one of the worst offenses overall with Wilson, scoring just 18 points per game, which was 26th in the league, and totaling just 311 yards per game, which was 27th in the league since 2022. Sticking with today's theme of breaking records, the Broncos will take on an $85 million total in dead salary cap over the next 2 years by releasing Wilson, which will be the largest dead cap hit in NFL history. To simplify, this means the Broncos are willing to pay $85 million to have Wilson not be on the Broncos. This makes it very difficult for them to bring in free agents since they can't really afford big contracts. The trade and signing of Russell Wilson by the Broncos will arguably go down as one of, if not the worst experiment in NFL history. On the same topic of contracts and free agents, Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Evans made it official earlier this week that he will remain with Tampa Bay. Evans, which is Tampa Bay's career receiving leader, has agreed to a 2-year, $52 million contract to remain with the team that drafted him 7th overall back in 2014. Not to sound like a broken record, but continuing on the theme of other kind of broken records, but Evans is on pace to break some of his own. Evans is the only player in NFL history to begin a career with 10 consecutive seasons with at least 1,000 yards receiving, and like I mentioned, he's Tampa Bay's career leader in receptions with 762, in yards with 11,680, and touchdowns with an astounding 94. Tampa Bay hopes that this move will entice quarterback Baker Mayfield to remain with Tampa Bay for the future as well. With all of that said and all of those records set, I want to thank you for joining me on the 99th episode of Sports Corner. Be sure to tune in to the 100th episode next week. I'm still not exactly sure what special thing I'll do, but it'll be a fun episode nonetheless. Be sure to come right back next week for more sports news and updates. I'm Cole Young. Have a great weekend.